Well, hello everybody. Today I have a little bit of a different video for you. I was thinking about some books that I really have benefited from in my author career, and uh, honestly, the list is just absolutely huge. So I ended up picking four books that I think were incredibly impactful for me. Not every book is going to be impactful for everybody because, like everything in life, or almost everything in life, books exist in a context, right? And so the context is set when the author writes it, but the context changes for every person who picks up the book because of everything that you as a reader bring to the book. So, with that caveat, here are four books that have significantly impacted my writing journey. The first one is one that probably a lot of people have heard about, and that is Save the Cat. And Save the Cat is actually not this is not a novel writing book. Instead, it is a screenwriting book. And the reason Save the Cat was so impactful for me was because I am just a complete and absolute pantser. I'm a discovery writer through and through, and often I will write a plot out and then I just won't follow it at all, and I'll just write something completely different. The book will end up completely different. In fact, one of the series that I'm working on right now, Iron Tyrant, I was just mentioning to a friend, I have literally completely rewritten the entire plot of the entire series because one of the books just went completely sideways and I loved it, right? It was exciting to me, and so I just kept that, and now I am literally having to go through and replot the whole thing, which is a little bit frustrating, but ultimately I think is going to create for a more natural and better story. Why then did I like Save the Cat so much? Because it gave me a framework to use to think through plotting. Because even if you are not a plotter, even if you're a pantser like me, like hardcore pantser, you need the framework of a plot to understand the flow of it. So where this book was super helpful is the author, Blake Snyder, walked through sort of what makes popular things popular in terms of story, and he identified a bunch of those things, and then he talked through sort of the standard plot structure, right? And reading that gave me this good sense for, okay, this is the standard. This is not what you have to do. It's not like you have to make sure that every single one of your stories fits in that plot, structure, or you've failed. No. This is baseline. And from there, we can make our adjustments and we can explore and we can do all of the different things we want to do with the story that make it interesting, that make it unique, that make it ours. But having the framework is super important. Anybody who's been around this channel for any length of time probably knows that I am obsessed with principles and frameworks, right? Because once you have principles, once you have frameworks, then you have a ton of freedom inside of them without the worry that what you're creating is just going to fall flat, right? And so Save the Cat was super helpful in just understanding the baseline for good story. And so I found that book tremendously helpful. Again, I don't follow it. I don't use his methodology. I don't sit down and plot out the way he suggests. I did it once so that I could understand it. And from there, that was like, cool, I've done it. Let me now apply this general flow of the story to my own stories, right? And so that was super helpful. The second book is one that is probably a little bit less well-known, but I think it should be more well-known. And that is The Emotional Craft of Fiction. This is a book by Donald Maass, and he is a longtime agent and has been in the industry for a really long time and has seen what wins in terms of books, right? And he identifies something in this story that is super important for improving your craft, which is that there are two stories, or really 3 or 4 stories going on in every book. And that is the story that is on the surface and the story that is under the surface. And the emotional craft of fiction is really about understanding the inner workings of your character, whether you're not going to spell it out. That's not important. It's just understanding it so that you can write both the visible story and the invisible story, right? The plot and the character development. This is ultimately how you get good character-driven stories. And all stories should be character-driven in some sense. Some, are obviously more plot-heavy, some are more character-heavy. But regardless, you need both for it to be a good story. All plot and no character development ends up feeling really flat, and all character development and no plot ends up feeling boring. So you need some of both, and this is absolutely 100% the best book I've ever read on developing the inner life of a character and understanding how you can use that to add richness and depth to your story and to the world, and more importantly, to the characters themselves, so they become relatable to your readers. Donald Maass has a ton of books out on craft, and they're all amazing. I literally had trouble picking between his books for which one to do. I think this one edges out the others. He also has the sort of second pick for me was 21st Century Fiction, which just was also a fantastic book. But The Emotional Craft of Fiction, I think, is my favorite of his. So those are two craft books that I think everybody should read. They have impacted my life in a very practical way as I improve and grow in my writing. But the other two books that I ended up settling on are books that are not what you would necessarily expect from a video like this. And that's because I realized that the books that have helped me the most in terms of my author career or my writing haven't been craft books. What's helped me in improving my craft has ultimately been just writing more and getting better feedback and spending more time intentionally trying to improve my writing, deliberate practice. And I've talked about that in other videos. The two books, though, that have sort of had the greatest impact on me are process books. So the first one is Atomic Habits. And this is a book that I talk about at any chance that I get. Atomic Habits by James Clear is the single best habit building book in existence. Bar none, hands down, this is the book. If you are looking to improve the systems in your life and your habits and stuff like that, Atomic Habits is it. It also happens, as a bonus, if you write nonfiction, to be the single best organized and structured book, nonfiction book, that I have ever encountered in my life. Like, you could just, if you write nonfiction, you should buy this book just to study the index and understand how he lays out his arguments and how he establishes his flow from beginning to end, because it's just supremely well done. Atomic Habits is a book that you're going to want to read if you're really serious about being a full-time author, about being a professional, and establishing a writing habit. It's going to do more for you, in my opinion, than any of the other books. And believe me, there are a bunch of them, and a lot of them are really good. But it's going to do more for you than any of those other books in terms of how do I actually get myself to consistently sit down and write. This was the book that I used to construct my whole writing routine, which lets me get about 10,000 words a day easily. 20,000 if I'm pushing it, and it has allowed me to do that because of what I learned in this book. It also, again, has the added benefit of being able to be applied to anything in your life, and so it's just a really good book to read. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, I would highly recommend it. The audiobook is fantastic as well. The last book is Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and this is a life-changing book. This is a book that my mom gave me when I was younger, and I read a little bit and was like, nah, and then I stuck it on my shelf. And then one day, kind of out of the blue, she messaged me and she was like, "Hey, did you ever read that book?" And I was like, "No, I didn't end up reading it." And I felt a little bit bad about that. So I went and I picked it up and I started reading it. And it's sort of hard to describe, but flow is how you turn your life into easy mode. Flow is the set of principles that you need to understand to just make life more enjoyable and easier all the way across the board. And that's not precisely true, because what flow is about is introducing difficulty into your life, but it's about introducing difficulty in the right amounts. And our brains are these magical machines that do something incredible when our experience becomes optimal. And flow is the study of optimal experience. So when you understand the principles that sit underneath flow, you can actually optimize your life for optimal experience. And that's what I've done. I've spent a ton of time optimizing my life for optimal experience. And the reality is that life is never easy, right? Life is always going to be hard, and every day is not a perfect day, and you can't be, above the curve every single day of your life. And anybody who tells you that you can be forever happy and constantly, joyful and all of that kind of stuff is trying to sell you something, because that's just not the human experience. The human experience comes with difficulty and suffering and challenge, and wonder and joy and peace and all of these different emotions, and we feel them in varying amounts. But flow is how you optimize your life for optimal experience. That means that you get the maximal amount of the positives and the minimal amount of the negatives. And you do it by turning suffering into something that you desperately want to experience. This book is legitimately life-changing. Legitimately. It's not super easy to read because it is a pretty it's a pretty technical book about the psychology of optimal experience. But I highly recommend it for anybody who is pursuing any kind of creative task, because one of the things that accompanies high levels of creativity is frustration. And frustration is often this massive stumbling block for creatives. And flow can help you take your frustrations, and it can help you understand how to turn them into, again, optimal experience. And once you do that, all of a sudden, the things that were frustrating you before become significantly less frustrating. It doesn't mean that the frustrations go away completely, right? There's no magic cure, there's no silver bullet, none of that stuff. But flow is going to allow you to get the most out of life, to enjoy yourself as much as is possible. So that would be my recommendation. If you're looking for 4 books that could potentially change your life, I would recommend these ones. On the craft side, I would recommend Save the Cat. Again, you want to understand the principles around plotting baseline, right? What the plot of the story should be at a baseline. You want to understand that. And then I would highly recommend The Emotional Craft of Fiction, just because it's going to help you turn your stories into something much richer, right? To explore the characters and to understand the internal story that is happening inside each of them is going to drastically improve your writing. Then I would also recommend you read Atomic Habits, because it's just a preeminently practical guide to how does a human actually build habits, and why is it that you can't seem to build the habits you want, and you always seem to build habits you don't want. And then finally, I would highly recommend that you read Flow. I've already ranted about how amazing it is, but I'll just do it a little bit more because it really is that amazing. Flow is the study of optimal experience. And so if you want to have an optimal experience in your life, in your everyday existence, then flow is going to be how you do it. But I'm always looking for new books to read. So if you have a good recommendation for a craft book or a non-craft book that might help me in my life, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. And if I get a chance, I'll read it.